Good morning, everyone. I welcome you to another exciting time in OOU-GES 151 class, Modern Agriculture and Rural Development. I want to believe we'll be having a beautiful time together in learning and discovery of opportunities in agriculture. Today, I will be speaking to you about cultural practices, agricultural and farming system. Lecture 4, Lesson 4. We're going to be looking at Lesson 4 today. My name is Dr. OOU-GES151. This morning, we want to quickly look at some cultural practices that are done before we can have agricultural produce, as well as some farming systems that are commonly practiced in agriculture. Modern agriculture requires knowledge and skill to enable farmers develop the required quality and favorable attitude to enhance them to benefit from agricultural technology. The lesson outcome at the end of this lesson, you are supposed to have a good understanding of what agricultural practices are, agricultural system, farming system, as well as some cropping practices in the tropics. What are cultural practices? Cultural practices are activities that are carried out on the farm before planting, during the planting process, as well as after planting, that is post-planting operations. These activities are categorized into three. We have the pre-planting, that is, every activities that are involved before your seeds are planted or your stalks or seedlings are transferred to the field. These are called pre-planting activities. Then we also have activities that are carried out on the farm during the planting time or planting process. And then the last category is the post-planting activity. After you have planted your crops, there are activities that you also carried out. I'm going to take each of these categories one by one. The first one we're going to be looking at is the pre-planting operations. Pre-planting operations. There is a particular activity that is very, very important before you can begin to plant your crop. And that is the choice of the land, which we also call site selection. Site selection. The ability to choose a site that is favorable for your crop. So you want to look at the site, and there are things or there are factors that guide how and where you choose for your planting activities. The first one there is the slope, or what we also call topography, or the nature of the land. This, we want to look at whether the land is flat, whether the land is hilly, and whether the land is relatively flat or hilly. We have effect on what you are going to plant, how you are going to go about your planting, the kind of system or method of planting you can employ. So you want to look at the land, because a land that is sloping might encourage to some extent erosion, and this will then add more to your cost of production to control erosion. However, we are not saying you cannot plant on a hilly or a sloping land, but you must factor into the erosion control practices. Another factor that you must consider when you are selecting your site is the type of soil. Different crops are tolerant to different type of soil. Different crops are tolerant to different type of soil. For example, tomato will do well on sandy loam, whereas some other crops like other leaf vegetable will rather do well on loamy soil. So you want to look at the type of soil you have and then be able to look at the type of crop that you can put the land to. This is very important. So some crops require a highly fertile soil because they take in a lot of nutrients, whereas crops like legumes can also replenish soil. So your soil doesn't have to be too fertile to support leguminous crops. So you want to look at soil type. Another one is the availability of the inputs you are going to be using. You want to look at it. For instance, you want to look at how you are going to transport your inputs to the farm. And when you have your produce, how you are going to also transport them to the market. So you want to look at that. River transportation is a very good one. You want to look at it. You want to also look at the availability of labor before you choose your site. You want to look at availability of labor in the communities. If you have to go to a long distance community to bring in labor to your farm, it's going to cost you more. So you want to look at the environment where you intend to site your crop, whether you will have enough labor. Number two thing we look at under pre-planting activity is land clearing. Land clearing is a very big one because for anyone to want to plant, you need to remove weeds, bushes, stumps that are on the farm to create a favorable environment for your crops and prevent unnecessary competition for nutrients and water. So the nature of the vegetation that is on the farm will also determine the type of equipment or tools you are going to be using. If, for instance, the farmland has a lot of trees and you want to pull them down, you may need to bring in a machinery like bulldozer. However, if it is a land that is covered with shrubs, you may want to use some other less soil moving equipment to clear the land. After the clearing, we then go on to burning. You go on to burn the debris, you pack them together, you burn them to the ashes that you gather from this burnt material can be used to lime the soil. They have the benefit of liming the soil. Also, after you might have done this, because you have removed one tree or the other, one shrub or the other, there will still be stumps. STMPS, stumps on the farm. You need to remove all these stumps, especially if at any point in time you are going to be bringing in any machine. Otherwise, the stumps are going to puncture the tire of your machine. They will make it difficult for machines to work on your farm. So you need to remove stumps. You need to remove some dead roots from the farm. Then the farm layout, which is number 5 activity that we look into, is the outline of the farm, setting an outline for the farm. This can involve you dividing the land into several sections. For instance, maybe you want to practice crop production and then have a little expanse of land for animal rearing. You want to look at your land, you want to look at the type of soil you have, and then look for a place where your crop can be. You will not match them together. You cannot put everything together. So you want to lay out your farm. You want to divide them into several sections. Maybe you are going to build a shelter for your neighbor. You are going to build an office. You are going to bring a store. You are going to bring a storage facility like a barn, like a silo. You want to look at the layout of the farm. Where can I put my structure? Where can I put the borehole? Where do I put the powerhouse? Where do I put the equipment room? All these are part of farm layout. Then the next thing we want to look at after the farm layout is the tillage system. The tillage system. Now you have cleared the land. You have removed the debris. You have removed all the roots and the stump. Now you have laid out your farm. You already know where you are going to crop, where you are going to be planting your crops. After you have segmented all this, you then go into tilling the land. Tilling of the land is just to make the soil fine. We want to make the soil fine so that the crop will not have to struggle through to have to germinate. There won't be dead plants. There won't be any kind of cuttings that will prevent the roots of the plant from going deep into the soil. Any kind of resistance that can come from compaction, you want to remove it. That is the purpose of tillage. So tillage involves either plowing, harrowing, or ridging. It is not in all matters of farming that we ridge, but there are times we want to ridge for some purpose. So there is plowing, there is harrowing, and there is ridging. Well, we have mentioned about 5 practices under pre-planting activities. I started with site selection, land clearing, burning, stumping. Then we talked about farm layout, and finally we looked at tillage. Now we go on to, we have prepared the ground. Pre-planting activities are method of preparing the ground before you plant. Now we want to go to the next stage, which is next cultural practices, which is planting operation. Planting operation. We want to look at how to plant our crops. Every activities that involve the planting is what we want to look at. And here we want to look at the planting date. As farmer, you must look after you must have gotten your inputs, your seedlings or your seed. You want to look at the time to plant your crop. It is important to look at the planting date. Then the spacing. What is the spacing between one crop to the other? The spacing differs between crops. Spacing differs between crops. How much of space do a particular single crop will require to be able to give its maximum yield? So you also consider the spacing. Then the seed rate, the number of seed that you are going to put into the hole is important. For instance, if you are planting maize, you can put 2 or 3, and when the maize has germinated, we remove them. Then planting depth. The planting depth. How deep should the hole in which you are going to plant your crop be? Mulching. Mulching is another thing that we consider when we are planting. Mulching is a process of using plant debris, plant remains, plant debris, leaves to cover the surface of the soil. We do this to improve the soil moisture content so that the water will not be, the soil moisture will not be completely evaporated from the surface. So to do that, then 2, it's also aid Weed, it suppresses weed. When you cover the surface of the soil, it suppresses weed. So the weed is an aid of weed control. It reduces weed growing on your land. It reduces, then it controls soil erosion. It controls soil erosion. And lastly, mulching also increases the organic matter content of your soil. I'll repeat those 4 points. I said when you mulch your land, the first thing it does is that it conserves soil moisture from being lost to the atmosphere. Number 2, it suppresses weed. Number 3, it controls soil erosion. It controls soil erosion. And lastly, it increases soil organic matter. Once the debris decay, they add nutrients to the soil. Okay? Nursery establishment. That is the next thing we do. After mulching the land, we then establish nursery. It is not all crops that require nursery, but for crops that require nursery, that is crops that cannot be planted directly to the field, nursery is established for them. And afterward, the seedlings are then transplanted to the field. Okay, and the last one is transplanting. After you must have prepared your nursery and the plant has been exposed through the process of hardening, you then take them to the field. Then, after you must have mulched your soil, you can then proceed to the nursery for nursery establishment. That is, you establish your nursery. Not all crops are established in the nursery. However, there are some crops that must be put in nursery, like cocoa, like cola, like oil palm. They are raised in the nursery before they are transplanted. And then the last activity under planting activity is transplanting. That is bringing seedlings from the nursery to the field. Okay, we then move on to the next cultural practice, which is post-planting operation. That is activities that are carried out after planting of crops. Activities that are carried out after planting of crops. The first thing we do after our crops have germinated is to thin them, to remove. When you want to plant, you plant more than the normal number of seeds or seedlings, giving room for those that may not germinate. So as soon as you discover that one or two of the seedlings, probably you are planting maize and then you put 3 seedlings, 3 seeds into the hole, you go back after germination and then remove 1 or 2, leaving 1 so that there won't be unnecessary competition. So the process of tilling is removing the excess seedlings from the seed hole. The opposite of thinning is supplying. Supplying. In cases where the seeds or the seedling do not germinate or survive, you will go and resupply. You bring forth another seed. You replant another seed or transplant another seedling. That is the process of supplying. We have mentioned mulching. Mulching can also be done even after planting. Mulching can be done even after planting. So it can also come under post-planting operation. Another thing that we do after planting is application of fertilizer or manure. Fertilizer or manure. When you have tested your soil and you discover that your soil requires some nutrients, you want to amend the soil, you want to make it better so that the plants can grow well, then you add your fertilizer. And after that, you continue to water, which we call irrigation. Irrigation is the artificial application of water to the soil. Apart from rainfall, when there is shortage of rainfall, you want to supplement with irrigation. Weeding is another activity that we do after planting. Weeding, you remove the weed. There is nothing you can do with weed grow on your soil. And so when there are weeds on your farm, you remove them either by the use of hoe and cutlass or by the use of herbicides. But you need to remove weeds to prevent competition for nutrients and water. The next one is pest and disease control. Pest and disease control. As soon as you notice the presence of some pests on your crop, that is insects that are eating the crops, or you notice that some leaves are getting mutilated or they are becoming sickly, you quick diseased, you quickly or destroyed, you quickly apply a pesticide. You apply a pesticide. Then the next one is harvesting. When your crop have matured, when you go forth to harvest the crop, you harvest. Harvesting can be done with the hand, can be done with harvester. So you harvest your crop. After harvesting right on the farm, there are one or two farm activity processing that you do. So you go about, do this, and then you can store your crop, which is the last activity in post planting operations. Storage. You store your crop either in the barn, in the silo, or in the crib. You put them where they should be properly kept, where they can stay for a long time, and where the humidity and water content can be controlled. The next thing we're going to be looking at after cultural practices is agricultural systems. Agricultural systems. Agricultural systems are ways or methods by which group of people in a particular society are raising their crops and their growing, raising crops and animals for survival or to increase their living standard. Ways or methods by which group of people are raising their animals and planting their crops for survival and also to increase their living standard. In Africa, farming system and agricultural practices go pari passu. They are not inseparable. You cannot separate them. And these agricultural systems are guided by the farmland size, the size of the farm that they have access to. Two, how scattered these farmlands are, how scattered. If the farmland is from family, it's definitely going to be fragmented. You have one at Okeodo, you have another one at Gon Road, you have another one around post office, you can then have another one at PS. Because they are fragmented, you need to carefully look at what systems that you can use to harness them together. Another factor that guides the type of agricultural system you do is your knowledge, your low technical know-how. What exactly do you know? How far can your knowledge and skill go? Then the kind of equipment or implements you are exposed to also guide the type of agricultural system you can use. We want to quickly look at some farming systems. Farming system. Many types of farming system exist. There are so many types, so many types. However, we're going to, for the purpose of this course, stick to just about three. We're going to be looking at three farming systems. And these include arable farming. Arable farming. Number two, mixed farming. And the third one is livestock or pastoral farming. What is arable farming? Arable farming simply means system of planting crops. It's a system of crop production. Arable farming is just talking about crop production, producing food, producing food crops such as cereals. Cereals include maize, rice, millet, sorghum, legumes like soybean. You want to look at how to do that. Root and tuber crops like cassava, your yam. You want to look at what you can do with them. The system of planting all these food crops is what we call arable farming. What is mixed farming? Mixed farming is the system of planting food crops as well as rearing of animals. Planting of food crops as well as rearing of animals. There is a system in which you have in your farm, there is a small space for food crops, and then there is another space for rearing of your animal. And you raise your food crops in the season, and then raise pastures or grasses for your animal in another season. So it is called mixed farming. Then the third one is livestock or pastoral farming. Livestock or pastoral farming, this is a farming system in which you devote your time to rearing of animals. It can be raising of poultry bucks, it can be pig, it can be rabbits, it can be sheep and goats, and it can also be rearing of cattle. But what you do is you rear livestock. There are three types of pastoral farming or livestock farming. Three types of pastoral farming or livestock farming. We have what we call nomadic farming. Nomadic farming. Nomadic farming is the system of livestock farming in which the herders move their animals from one place to the other. They move the animal from one place to the other in search of pastures. In search of pasture, this you would have seen mix some of them in your community. You see Fulani herdsmen moving their cattle, especially during the dry season, from one end to the other in search of green pastures. This process is what we call nomadic. They are always on the move. They are always traveling. They are always traveling. They will settle down in a place for a period of time, allow the ants to eat, and afterwards they move there to the next location. And this is mostly done during the dry season. The second type of pastoral farming is what we call lay farming. Lay farming. In this system, you combine the production of pasture with crop production. You combine the production of pasture with crop production in alternation. Wherever you are raising your animals, you create a space for crop, and then you are raising, when you raise some particular food crop this season, the next season you raise your pasture, so that your animals will not be moved around, but they will depend on the pasture. They will depend on the pasture. After the arable crops, you put in the pasture, and so they have something to graze. Then the last one is called the ranching system. In this system, it is an improved farming system, and it is mostly carried out in developed countries. This is what is common in developed countries, in which you have a place, a confined place for the animals, and these animals are well catered for. Their food are brought to them, they are fed, and they have their water supplied, and they live in a ranch. They live in a ranch. And this environment is usually well protected and well taken care of. Additional vitamins and minerals can then be supply to the animals. There are some other agricultural systems that have been developed in recent time. We have fish farming. People now go into fish ponds production. We prepare fish ponds for fish production. We also have snailry of recent. A lot of people are going to snail farming, in which they are not in the wild anymore. You bring the snails home, raise a place for them, feed them, give them water, and take care of them. And these are very common all over the world now. The last part of the course, we are going to be looking at farming or cropping practices. Farming or cropping practices. These are actions that are dictated by the environment, the availability of land, the type of cropping system you want to go into is being dictated by the environment you have, by the land that is available to you, by the soil fertility, and social and economic status of each farmer. And so we have come to some of these farming systems. The first one we're going to be looking at is what we call shifting cultivation. Shifting cultivation. Shifting cultivation is as old as everything, is as old as old and cutlass. This is an ancient practice in which farmer will crop a land for a specific number of years, and when it is begin to observe that the yield that is getting from the land has reduced or is reducing, he will abandon the land, allow the land to fallow for 5 to 10 years, relocate to another land. He will relocate to another place and go and start farming on another plot of land, leaving the one he has been using before. And this is why we call it shifting. He will shift from a land to another land. And when the second land also has been used for some time and he discovered that the yield is also reducing, he moved to another one to allow the first land and the second land to rejuvenate, to regain their status, to regain their fertility status. The practice is determined by the length of time the soil will sustain cultivation. It has advantages and disadvantages. One of the advantages is that it helps the soil to restore its fertility because it has been used up, the nutrients in the soil have been used up by the crops for a certain number of years, and then when you leave the land to regain its strength again, to regain its fertility, after 10 years, the soil will have restored its nutrient to some extent. Number two is that it can help to check pests and diseases because you abandon it. Once pests fly in and they can't find that kind of crop there again, they will migrate to another place. So it can be a way of checking pests and diseases. One of the disadvantages is that it requires a lot of land. It requires a lot of land. If a particular farmer has to move from a land after using it for 4 or 5 years, you move to and relocate to another land, and then you keep moving like that, you discover that a lot of land will be required. Number two is that a lot of money, efforts, energy, time will be. And the last one is that with increasing population, it will become impossible to continue this system of cultivation because there is an increase in population and there is an increase in the demand for land. So it becomes difficult to get this kind of land. So we cannot continue it. Another cropping system we quickly look at is what we call continuous cropping. Continuous cropping is just the process of planting on the same land year in and year out. You are planting there every year without allowing the land to rest. The crops that will be planted may be annual or perennial, but the land is kept under cultivation every year, every season. It has its advantages. One of the advantages is that it can be well organized. You can organize it into a crop rotation system. Number two is that it encourages the use of fertilizer. It's easy to use fertilizer on such a land. No, but it has its disadvantages. One of the disadvantages is that the soil fertility will be depleted over time because every year you keep it under cultivation, the land nutrients will be depleted. It can encourage soil erosion. It can encourage soil erosion. And then the last one is that your productivity or yield will reduce with time because of overuse of the land. The productivity, the yield will reduce. Another one, number three, is what we call monocropping. Monocropping. Monocropping is a system of planting one crop, a single crop, on a piece of land for a season. For a season. It has its own advantages and disadvantages too. One of the advantages is that the farmer will become an expert in that particular crop is producing. Number two is that it encourages large-scale production. If, for instance, you are planting cassava alone, it's easy for you to plant a large hectare of cassava. So it can encourage large scale. Disadvantages is this. It will not be suitable for farm machineries for harvesting. It's difficult to harvest with farm machinery. And when you are harvesting as well, there is the danger of trapping on the young crops. The danger of trapping on the young crops. And lastly, it can lead to harmful competition among crops. Intercropping. This is the planting of fast-growing and fast-maturing crops. Intercropping is planting of fast-growing and slow-growing crop. In this type, you want to plant a crop that will mature within 3 months, like maize, and then you add another crop that can take 8 to 9 months, like cassava. Growing the two of them together is what we call intercropping. So you can harvest one before the other one matures. Advantages is that you can effectively use the land, the labor, over a long period of time. Two, the risk of crop failure is eliminated. If cassava didn't do well, the yams will do well or maize will do well. And the land is always under cover so that you can check weed. The last one I'm going to be looking at is crop rotation. Crop rotation. This is the practice in which same piece of land is kept under cultivation every year in such a way that crops are sequentially arranged. They are arranged in a sequential manner. It is cheap to practice. It is cheap to practice. So with this, you can see that there are several cultural practices that are involved in planting crops. Thank you for listening.